For Better, for Worse, by Pam Weaver. Narrated by Jenny Funnell. Chapter 1. July 1948. It was gone. Really gone. She'd spent the past hour hunting high and low for it, but it was no use. She couldn't find it anywhere. She'd tried all the usual places first, the drawer, the kitchen dresser, her coat pocket, but she quickly drew a blank. She'd even been outside and looked down the street in the hope that it hadn't fallen from her pocket, but she couldn't see it. Her stomach was in knots. After everything else, this couldn't be happening. Having tried the obvious places, for the past 10 minutes she'd been looking in the pram, the toy box, and the outside lav, places where she knew it couldn't possibly be, and yet she hoped against hope that she'd find it. "Have you seen Mummy's purse?" Jenny pushed her silky brown hair out of her eyes and looked up at her mother with a blank expression. She was a pretty child with long eyelashes. Born in the middle of the war, she was Sarah's first child. "My purse," Sarah said impatiently. "Have you taken it to play shops?"
"Oh, Mummy," her daughter tutted, one hand on her hip and her mother's scolding expression on her face. "I'm not playing shops. This is Dolly's tea party."
Sarah frowned crossly. "Don't get lippy with me, young lady. I asked you a question. Have you seen my purse?" Her daughter looked suitably chastised.
"No, Mummy."
Sarah's heart melted. She shouldn't have spoken to her like that. She wasn't having a good day either. Just an hour ago, Jenny had come into the shared kitchen with a worried frown.
"Mummy, Goldie isn't very well."
Sarah had followed her back up to the bedroom, and sure enough, her pet goldfish was floating on the top of the water. Slipping her arm around her daughter's shoulder, Sarah had to explain that Goldie wasn't ill. She had died and gone to heaven. Jenny had stared at her mother, her wide eyes brimming with tears.
"But why?"
Why indeed, thought Sarah. It just happens, darling. Fish get old and die. It was Goldie's time to go.
"Is that what happened to Daddy?"
Jenny's words hung in the air like icicles, and Sarah had swallowed hard. Her heartbeat quickened and she felt very uncomfortable. It was at that moment she realized she should have talked to her daughter before. She had no idea the poor little mite had been thinking that Henry was dead. "No, darling," she'd said, drawing her closer. "Daddy isn't dead. Daddy went to live somewhere else."
"Why, Mummy? Didn't he like living with us?"
Sarah had taken in a silent breath, wondering how on earth she could answer that. She didn't really understand herself, so how was she going to explain to a 6-year-old why her father had simply packed his bags and walked out? Up until that moment, she had thought Jenny was coping well. She'd seemed to accept that Henry had gone away, but as they'd talked, Sarah could see that Jenny hadn't really understood after all. "I'm sure Daddy loved living with us," she'd said, kneeling down to look into Jenny's face. "But he had to go away." Suddenly, Sarah's youngest daughter, Lulu, crashed into them and tried to kiss her big sister. Jenny laid her head on her mother's shoulder.
"Did it hurt?"
Sarah frowned. It was hard to follow the child's reasoning. Did what hurt?
"Did it hurt Goldie when she died?"
By now, Sarah had drawn her arms around both her children. "No, I don't think it did. And I'm sure Goldie had a very happy life." Jenny had put her hands on the goldfish bowl.
"Can we bury her?"
"Of course," smiled Sarah. "I think I've got a little box we can put her in, and we'll bury her in the garden." They laid the fish on a bed of cotton wool inside a box which once held 3 man-sized handkerchiefs, and Sarah put the lid on. Goldie was all ready for burial, but they couldn't do it there and then. It was raining hard, and Sarah didn't have anything suitable for digging.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?